A particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up on your face. It lives somewhere lower than that, in your shoulders, maybe, or in that specific weight of your hands when you set your keys down at the end of the day and stand in your own inching way for a moment before anyone knows you're home. In this cosmic abyss, my mind takes flight. Just a moment, just long enough to put the right expression on to decide which version of yourself that evening needs, and then you push through, and you're already asking who needs what, already moving, already useful. I've been doing this my entire life. My name? Nadia Osman. I'm 31-year-old. I'm a licensed occupational therapist at a rehabilitation center in Birmingham, Alabama, which means I spend 8 hours a day helping people relearn how to do things their bodies forgot, how to button a shirt, how to hold a spoon, how to trust a limb that betrayed them. I am good at my job in the particular way that people who spend their whole lives paying close attention to what other people need to tend to be good at, caring professions. My patients' families call me patient and warm and thorough. My supervisor calls me one of the most reliable people she ever worked with. My friend Tasha, she had known me since 7th grade and therefore no reason to be diplomatic, calls me a control freak with God complex who chose occupational therapy because it was the one job where being control, where being in charge of everyone else's recovery was not only acceptable, but it was encouraged. I told you she was reductive. She said reductive don't mean wrong. She's not wrong. I am the oldest of four. After me comes Kareem, who's 28 and could have been a lawyer or a doctor or an architect or genuinely anything that he set his considerable mind to. And instead, he spent the last 6 years cycling through positions, junior analyst, then marketing coordinator, then something vague at a startup that folded, then substitute teacher, then back to something vague with a specific relentlessness of a person who's very smart and very lost and has yet figured out that those two things are connected. He is funny in a way that people who are in pain are often funny, sharp, precise, a little too willing to make himself the punchline. He makes everyone in the room feel seen and then goes home alone. I don't think anyone except me notices the difference between his public self and his private one. And I only notice because I've been noticing Kareem my entire life. Then Imani, 26. She has mama's face and baba's eyes and gentleness about her that the world has not always been kind to. She got married at 22 to Marcus Webb, who coached track on Saturdays and volunteers at the Masjid Youth Program and brings mama flowers on Eid and when everyone in our family and extended community regards as almost embarrassingly good. He has a strong handshake and a podcast about black men emotional intelligence. He at the halfway line with 500,000 subscribers. Imani posts picture of them at a restaurant and they always look beautiful. She always looked a little tired in the eyes. Nobody mentioned the tired eyes because Marcus is a wonderful and Imani is lucky and some things we decide not to look at differently. And then Malik, 23, junior at the University of Alabama. He was born when I was 8 years old, and I remember the exact day Mama brought him home from the hospital and put him in my arms. And then, even that night, I understood something was being handed to me that was larger than a baby. He's the youngest and the most beloved and the most unbothered by of being the most beloved, which is either a mark of very good character or a mark of having never had to think about it because nobody ever made him. I have yet to decide which. I love him more than I can account for rationally. He calls me Natty, which I hate, and I've been telling him I hate it for 15 years, and he has not stopped because he knows I don't actually hate it. These are my people. This my family. We grew up in Birmingham in a house on a street where most of the neighbors were Baptists and few were nothing in particular. We were the Muslim family in the corner house with the modest dress code and the Ramadan schedule and the Quran on the coffee table, which made us, depending on who you asked, either exotic or suspicious or just quietly different in a way that doesn't invite conversation. Mama converted when she married Baba. She had been Constance Renee Williams of Birmingham Williams family raised in a church where the choir wore robes and the pastor knew everyone's business. And Sunday's dinner afterwards was a spiritual experience in its own right. He gave all that up, or didn't give up exactly, more like set it down carefully in a specific place where she could visit sometimes and became Khadija Osman, wife, mother, and eventually co-founder of a small nonprofit that helped newly incarcerated women get job certification. She didn't talk much about the conversion itself. It was not a performance for her. It was just a decision she had made and then built her life on it, the way you build on any foundation by trusting enough to put weight on it. Baba was Ibrahim Osman, Somali by birth, American About 40 years living here, Muslim by lineage and then choice. The way children of faith sometimes make the faith their own into adulthood when they could have walked away from it instead. He was an engineer. He designed water treatment systems and like jazz. Made the best biscuit in our family despite being Somali and everyone's grandmother claiming the biscuits were their domain specifically. He was funny and warm, occasionally maddening in the way of a man who was never quite present even though they're in the room. Not absent. He was never absent, just there always a small part of him behind a door he didn't open. I just thought it was his personality. The private room in himself, that was his alone. Baba died 7 years ago, heart attack, March 15. Tuesday in a month that smelled like almost spring. He was 54. He was making tea in the kitchen before work. Mama found him. I was 24. I had just started my first real job 2 months in, still learning which patients needed firm encouragement and which needed soft. I got a call at 7:43 in the morning while I was eating a granola bar in my car in the parking garage, and I drove back across the city to our house, and everything about the drive it burned into my memory in that specific way that traumatic moments get burned. Not photographically, not completely, but in a disconnected flashes, the particular song that was on the radio when I turned the car on, the color of the sky, which was low grade that wasn't quite rain, the way my hands fell on the steering wheel, which was steady, which is the thing I remember most clearly. My hands were steady the whole way there, even then, even at 24, driving to a thing that was going to reorganize my entire life, my hands were steady. Because somebody had to have their steady hands. That's the thing that nobody tells you when you're the strong one. Not that you don't feel it, it's that you felt it somewhere quiet and internal while your hands stay steady and your voice stays even and you walk into whatever room needs walking into and you do whatever needs doing. And then maybe later, alone in your own car, in a parking garage, you let a minute happen, a minute where you're not steady, and you put that minute somewhere it won't be visible, and you go back in. I've had many such minutes in the last 7 years. Nobody has seen one. In the weeks after Baba died, there was so much to do that the doing became its own anesthetic. There was the janaza to organize, the burial, the family traveling in from different cities, Baba relatives from Minnesota and Toronto, who I met before twice, who spoke Somali to each other and switched to English to speak to us, whom I found oddly comforting in a way, people who share their grief, but not share a history with. There was Mama, who moved through the first week in a specific suspended state that I now understand was shock. At the time looked almost like peace, like she was waiting for someone to tell her how to feel. There was Kareem, 21 at the time, home from his junior year and sleeping 15 hours a day and eating almost nothing, which is how Kareem grieves, by retreating inward until the inward is the only place that exists. Imani, 18, who cried in a way that was almost operatic, not performed. She wasn't performing. She just felt things at a full volume in a way the rest of us didn't, and I had always loved her for it, even when it was inconvenient. Malik was 16 at the time, who did not cry at all for 6 days and then cried for approximately 4 hours straight while I sat with him in the bedroom floor and said nothing because there was nothing to say. And sometimes you just have to be the body in the room. I arranged everything. I made the calls. I fed people. I tracked who brought food so we could write thank you notes. I organized the finances with the attorney. I sat Mama at every appointment. I didn't want to go alone. I drove people to the airport. I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry in front of anyone. I was very, very useful. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the janaza, when in Baba's office looking for his 2015 tax folder, I found the letter. Wasn't hidden. That's the part that got me. That's the part I've turned over 1,000 times in 7 years since. It was just sitting there on his desk in an envelope, one of many papers in a pile that a living man would have gotten to eventually. A man who did not know he was gonna die in 6 weeks would not have hidden the things he needed to deal with. He would have left them in a pile. He would have planned to deal with them later. He never got later. My name was not on the envelope. His name was on the envelope, Ibrahim. In a handwriting I didn't recognize, careful and unhurried. Kind of handwriting that means someone sat down with intention. The envelope wasn't sealed. I told myself I was just checking to see if there's some urgent, something the state needed, something that required response. After all, I've been handling all the emails for the past 2 weeks since his passing, responding back to all of his colleagues from the past life, from message community members. Now, that's a lie I've told myself so many times is Warren Smooth. The truth is, I picked it up because it was addressed to my father in a handwriting I didn't know, and my father was dead, and I was 24 years old, and I wanted in that specific, irrational way of grief to know something about him I didn't know yet. To have one more thing, just one more thing that was new and his. I read the first paragraph, then the second, then I stopped. Letter was from a woman named Patricia Mills. She wrote that she had been trying to decide for years whether to contact him. She wrote that she had been sick. The word she used was sick. No further detail, the kind of vagueness that suggests the details was too large to write directly, and that being sick had made certain silences feel irresponsible. She wrote that their son was 20 years old, that he was doing well, that he deserved to know where he came from. She wrote that she wasn't asking for anything, she was just giving him the information. What he did with it was his. She signed it Patricia Mills. I put that letter back in the envelope. I walked out of the office. I stood in the hallway for a while, which in my memory was a very long time. In reality, it was probably just 90 seconds. I'm back in the kitchen and told Baba I couldn't find the 2015 folder. He said it was fine. He'd look at it later, and I watched him pour his tea and thought, he knows. This man who's standing in front of me pouring tea, knows that he has a 20-year-old son and has known for however long it took for Patricia Mills to decide to write that letter. And he's standing there pouring tea, and I'm the only other person in this house who knows. I never told him I read it. I never told anyone. 6 weeks later, he was on the kitchen floor dead. And that's how a secret became permanent. Not because you decide to keep it forever, but because the only person who could have helped you make sense out of it suddenly, irreversibly, unavailable. And then you're just left with it, the keeper of things that was never supposed to be yours to keep. I've thought many times about what would have happened if I'd walked back in that kitchen and said, Baba, I found the letter. I have thought about what his face would have done. That he would have told me everything or just enough. That we would have talked about it, really talked about it the way he and I sometimes did at late night. Everyone else was asleep. The kind of talking that goes on at actual place instead of circling it. Whether he would have felt relieved, I think he would have felt relieved. Don't you think so? That's the thought that has cost me the most. Here's what 7 years of carrying something looks from the outside. It looks completely normal. That's the thing. From the outside, it looks like a woman who's good at her job, close with her family, and occasionally tired in a way that busy people are tired, and maybe a little guarded in a way that private people are guarded. But nothing that would make you stop and look twice. I wake up 5:45 most mornings to pray Fajr, depending on the time. I run 3 miles if the weather cooperates and 2 miles if it doesn't, and 0 if I overslept, which happens more in the winter when the dark is stubborn. I make coffee, real coffee, the kind that takes several minutes in specific grinder because Baba loved good coffee and I inherited it from him. And it is one of the small ways I let myself have him back every morning. I eat something that's more nutritious than it is enjoyable. I drive to work. At work, I'm excellent. I do not say this with vanity. It is accurate, just accurate. I'm good with patients who are scared and good with ones who are angry and good with families who are more complicated than either. I have a particular skill with the elderly patients who feel humiliated by needing help, who grew up in a time when needing help was some kind of a failure. I understand something about that from the inside. I leave work and I go to Mama's house 2 or 3 evenings in the week, more during Ramadan, more during any crisis, more whenever I sense that the equilibrium is shifting in a way that requires management. Imani calls me most days. Reem calls when he's spiraling. Malik texts constantly, a stream of lowercase observations and memes and the occasional actual questions that I've learned to take seriously because Malik only asks questions when he actually needs the answer. I have friends, Tasha, who I mentioned, who knows me better than almost anybody, anyone, and has a tact not to say everything she knows out loud. Small group from the masjid, women I see at Jum'ah, and halaqas and occasional dinners, good women, warm women, women I genuinely like, and with whom I maintain specific proximity that allows community without vulnerability. I've been told by Tasha more than once that I am the kind of friend who shows up for everyone's emergencies and never reports my own. I told her that was because I don't have emergencies. She looked at me the way she looks at me. I changed the subject. I have been engaged once. His name was Tariq, and he was 34 years old when we met, and a good man by the reasonable measure, kind, practicing, employed, handsome in a specific way that photographs well. It matters to people more than they admit. We were together for 2 years. He proposed at 29 months, which feels both precise and exactly right as detail, because Tariq was always precise. He planned things carefully. He communicated clearly. He was in many ways everything a list would say to look for. I said yes, and then 6 months later, I gave that ring back. I told him it wasn't the right time. I told him I had a lot going on with my family. Both of those things were true. What was also true is that I told no one, including Tasha, was that in that 6 month of our engagement, I noticed something that frightened me. Tariq wanted to know me, really know me, not the managed version, not the capable, useful Nadia, But whatever was underneath that, he asked questions that went sideways instead of forward. The kind that opens the doors instead of moving past them. He noticed when I was fine in the performed sense rather than the actual sense. He would stop mid-sentence, mid-conversation, sometimes just look at me and say, "You don't have to do that with me." I didn't know what to do with a person who saw through the performance. I gave the ring right back. I told myself it was about timing. I've gotten better at being honest with myself about that particular story, but it took a while. The LinkedIn notification came on Tuesday in October. I almost didn't see it. I use LinkedIn the way most people use it. Not really, sporadically, for professional purposes that feel vaguely necessary without being urgent. The app was 3 pages deep on my phone. I only opened it because Tasha had sent me a job posting she thought I should look at, and I needed to look at it to look like I was considering it. The connection requests were just there. In the queue were two others, a former colleague and someone whose name I didn't recognize from a hospital in Montgomery. 3 requests sitting together. The other unimportant things come in clusters sometimes. His name was Daoud Osman Mills, graphic designer, Atlanta, Georgia. The last name was the thing, Osman Mills. Both halves of it. The Osman half, my father's name, my name, specific enough that it shouldn't be attached to a stranger, and the Mills half, which meant nothing to me until I read twice, and the letter came back to me completely and suddenly. I put my phone face down on the desk and sat there still for a while. Patricia Mills, their son. He had my father's jaws. That's what I noticed when I finally made myself look at the profile picture. Not immediately. Immediately, I just saw a man, late 20s, natural hair, holding a coffee cup. Background that suggested a studio or a creative office. Ordinary headshot. And then I looked longer and my eyes found the jaw. And I knew. The way you know family. It's not a thought exactly. It's recognition. Something faster than thinking, the body acknowledging, the mind is still trying to catch up. I didn't accept the request. I did not decline it. I put my phone in my desk drawer and for 4 patients, wrote 2 progress report and ate a vending machine bag of pretzels for lunch. Drove home, made dinner, called Imani and talked about nothing for 45 minutes and went to bed. I got up the next morning, prayed, ran, made coffee. I didn't look at LinkedIn. I did this for 11 days. Day 12, Tasha came over for dinner and I made jollof rice because Tasha is Nigerian and appreciates jollof in the way that is also standard by which she judges character. And halfway through the meal, she looked at me and said, "Something happening with you?" "Nothing happening with me. You have refilled my water glass 3 times. You overhost when you're stressed." I got a LinkedIn request from someone I don't know, I said, which was true and also not true. Wasn't the whole truth. And that's causing the water glass situation. It's complicated. Tasha put down her fork. When Tasha puts down her fork, it means she decided to have an actual conversation and you don't have a choice about participating. How complicated? I looked at my jaloofs. Family complicated, I said. She waited and I almost told her. I was the closest it's been in 7 years. To just say out loud to another person. It felt right there at the edge of my mouth. The whole thing, the letter, the envelope, and Baba in the kitchen floor, and Patricia Mills, and Dawood Osman Mills with a graphic design job, and my father's jaw. "Never mind," I said. "It's probably nothing." Tasha picked up her fork. She didn't push. That's the thing I loved most about her. She knows not to push. She also knows that not pushing is its own kind of pressure, but she applies it with grace. I refilled her water glass again for the 4th time without even thinking about it. He messaged me on day 12. I found it the next morning when I finally opened the app. "Assalamu alaikum. I know this is probably a strange message to receive from someone you don't know. My name is Daoud. I have a reason to believe that your father, Ibrahim Osman, may have been my father as well." I read that standing in my kitchen with my coffee getting cold. I just want to be careful how this comes because I understand this might be completely out of nowhere for you and I don't want to cause any harm to anyone. I'm not looking for anything materialistic. I'm not trying to disrupt your family. My mother passed away last month and before she died, she told me his name and told me I had a family in Birmingham. I found you through your profile. I set the coffee down. I understand completely if you don't want to respond. I will not contact you again if that's your preference. I just needed to try once. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. I thought about Patricia Mills and her careful handwriting. I thought about Baba's pile of papers and the envelope sitting in without apology. I thought about 7 years of being fine, 7 years of managing, 7 years of sitting across from my family at iftar and Eid and ordinary Sundays and knowing something they didn't know and deciding over and over that the not knowing was a gift I was giving them. I thought about my mother passed away last month. I thought about what it's like to lose someone who was supposed to explain everything, the person who Well, the other half of the story, I thought about Baba in the kitchen making tea, and then I opened the letter and typed without giving myself to think about it. Wa alaikum salam, Daoud. I've known about you for 7 years. I think it's time we talked. I sent it. I picked up my coffee. I went to work.